All right, we're going to finish up the section we had been working on in class today, which was 2.3, and this is where we stopped off right at the factor theorem. So basically this tells us that if f of x, let f of x be a polynomial, if f of c equals 0, then x minus c, all right, then x minus c right there is a factor of f of x. Or in b, if x minus c is a factor of f of x, then f minus c equals 0. All right, so, they kind of mean each other there. And so what that means is if we can find something that is a factor of it, then we also are finding one of the zeros. All right, so let's take a look at this first one. 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus 19x plus 6. And then we're going to set that equal to 0 right here. And then we're going to go ahead and try and solve this. And we're going to do this, I guess, just with synthetic division. So we want to go ahead and try and use 2 because they tell us 2 is a 0 of this function. All right? And so 2 is a 0. Therefore, what that tells us is that x minus 2 is a factor. In other words, we're saying that 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus 19x plus 6 is equal to x minus 2 times some a x squared plus bx plus c, like that. That there's something we can factor out of there because 2 is a 0 of it, so negative 2 is a factor. And so what we can do is go ahead and just actually try and divide the x minus 2 out of the 3x cubed plus 2x squared minus 19x plus 6. And so we'll go ahead and try that. So we put a 2 here, and then we put our coefficients, 3, 2, negative 19, 6. Draw a line. Excuse me. Bring the 3 down. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 plus 6 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. Negative 19 plus 16 is negative 3. And 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 there is 0, which means it did work as a factor. We have a 0 remainder. And then that tells us that if we do that division, we end up with 3x squared plus 8x minus 3. And so what that means is this part right here is essentially that part right there. So what we can say then is that this equals x minus 2 times 3x squared plus 8x minus 3. And now at this point, we have at least one of the factors, so we know one of the zeros is 2. And then all we have to do is finish factoring this out, and we will know what they are. Now, I don't like trying to factor something like that, 3x squared plus 8x minus 3. I mean, maybe you can come up with something. But if I can't see how to factor that real quick, I just automatically jump to the quadratic formula. So we're going to do, this is A, this is B, this is C. And so we can do that x equals the opposite of B. So we can write that up here. X equals negative B plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4AC. It's all under the square root, all over 2A. Okay? And that's when we have something like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right, that's separate from that. So we can go ahead and do that. So x equals opposite of b, which is 8. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared, so 64, minus 4 times a times c, just like that, all divided by 2 times a. Okay? And so doing some solving, negative 8 plus or minus. So here we have 4 times 3 times negative 3. So 4 times 3 is 12, and then 12 times negative 3 is negative 36. So it's a 64 minus negative 36, so it's plus 36 like that, all over 2 times 3, which is 6, which then tells us this is negative 8 plus or minus, 64 plus 36. This whole thing right here is just square root of 100. Okay? And so then we've got Square root of 100, which is 10 over 6. And so then we have two answers there. We've got the negative 8 plus 10 over 6, and we have the negative 8 minus 10 over 6. So negative 8 plus 10 is 2 over 6, which is 1/3. So that's one of our x's. And then over here, x equals negative 8 minus 10, which is negative 18 divided by 6. And that's negative 3. So by doing that, we now have all the zeros for the function. And so the zeros are the 2 that was given, the 1/3, and the negative 3. Okay? So we've fully solved this thing. We can factor this whole thing out, and we'll have that whole thing done there. In fact, let me redo that circle here real quick to give myself a little more room. Oops. And we can write this whole thing then as x minus 2 times x minus 1/3 times x plus 3. So that's this whole thing right there. This whole, well, not that whole thing. This whole thing right here, fully factored, is that. Okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one. It says solve the equation 3x cubed minus x squared minus 20x minus 12 equals 0, given that one solution, all right, this time they tell us one solution is negative 2. So solution is not, we have to be careful with that, because above they told us that 2 is a 0. Here they're telling us 2 is a solution, which means it's a 0. Okay, so that's what that meant. We had that page that told us all about that. So solution to 2, which means it's not a factor of negative 2, it's a solution of negative 2, it's a 0. So we put negative 2, and we'd write our coefficients, 3, negative 1, negative 20, negative 12. Do our synthetic division here. So we'll bring a 3 here. Negative 2 times negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. Negative 2 times negative 7 is 14. So negative 6 when we add those together. Negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12. And negative 12 plus positive 12 is 0. So that did work out to be one of the zeros. So we were good there. So that means this brings us down to the new function, or the new part. When we've taken that one out, all we have left is the 3x squared minus 7x minus 6 equals 0, right? So it's this part, and then it's, and then we have our x plus 2 here. Sorry. Okay? And so that's what this thing factors out, because we divided that x plus 2 out by doing the synthetic division with the negative 2. And so now we want to work on just solving this part. Again, I don't really want to mess around with that being factorable very easily or not. So I don't see something real quick. I'm going to pretty much immediately jump into the quadratic formula. So just like before, A, B, C, don't forget the negatives, all right, as you do that. So B is negative 7, C is negative 6, and A is just 3. So opposite of B, so it's negative of negative 7, so 7, plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared is 49, minus 4, times A, times C, which is negative 6, all square rooted, all over 2 times A, just like that. And then you start multiplying this all together and getting it figured out. This is 7 plus or minus square root of 49. And here we have 4 times 3, which is 12. And then 12 times 6 is 72. And then the negatives cancel right there. So this is plus 72 square rooted all over 6. And 49 plus 72 is 121, so it's the square root of 121 over 6, which means this is just 7 plus or minus the square root of 121 is 11 over 6, And so we'll get an x equals 7 plus 11 over 6. And we're going to get an x equals 7 minus 11 over 6. So 7 plus 11 is 18 over 6, which is just 3. So there's one of them. And then the other is 7 minus 11, which is negative 4 over 6, which is negative 2 thirds, just like that. And so now we know the zeros here are negative 2, negative 2 thirds, and 3. All right? We were given the negative 2, and then we found these other two. Okay? So that's pretty much it for that page. On the next page, we have the rational zeros test, and this can be kind of helpful if you're not given that first zero. So like on this page, they told us, they said 2 is a 0, or the solution is negative 2. They told us the first one. But what happens if you come across one of these and they don't tell you what the first one is, or what one of them is? At that point, you have to kind of start doing a little bit of guessing and checking, but we can narrow down the guessing and checking by taking a look at this. And what this will do is it'll give us all the possible rational zeros, and they'll all be of this form. So it will be P divided by Q, okay, where this will be the factors of the constant term. So that's that last term that doesn't have an x on it, doesn't have a variable on it, divided by the factors of the leading term. Okay? Or not the leading, the factors of the coefficient of the leading term. So the factors of the leading coefficient, I should probably say here. Coefficient. Okay, so factors of the leading coefficient. So if we look at this first one here, we can tell then that this is the constant term, so that's P. This is the leading coefficient, so that's Q. So P and Q there are just like that. So now let's list out all the possible P's and Q's. So possible. Here's all our possible rational zeros, okay? So this will be P over Q. And so we looked at first P, and we think of all the factors we can for negative 8. And we don't want to list them all multiple times, so we're just going to do this plus or minus 1. So positive 1, negative 1, positive 2, negative 2, positive 4, negative 4, and positive 8 and negative 8. Those are all the possible factors of negative 8. So negative 8 can be nice and evenly negative 8 can be nice and evenly divided by all of those numbers. And then on the bottom we have to do for Q, and so that's 2, and so we only have to worry about 2 of them there. It's plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 2, just like that. So those are all our possible zeros. We can reduce this by making all these possible fractions. So we're going to have positive and negatives of every single one of these. We can have the 1 over 1, we can have the 1 over 2, we can have the 2 over 1, the 2 over 2, the 4 over 1, the 4 over 2, the 8 divided by 1, and the 8 divided by 2. So those are all our possible combinations, where we're doing things like 1 divided by 1, and 1 divided by 2, and 2 divided by 1, and 2 divided by 2, and 4 divided by 1, and so on and so forth like that, all the way down. And then plus or minus of each of them, because we'll get positive and negative versions of both. Okay? And so then we can simplify these down, and we don't want to repeat them. So you look here, like this one is 1, and this one is 1. So we don't need to write 1 more than once. So we can have plus or minus 1. We can have a 1/2, which is right there. We can get a 2 from the 2 over 1, or the 4 over 2. So we've got 1, 1, 1/2. This is a 2, this is a 2. Then we have 4 over 1, which is a 4. And we have 8 over 2, which is a 4, so that's there. So those are our 4s. And then 8 over 1 is 8. So those are all the possible ones we have. Now what that did was narrow down our list of possible zeros. And so what you have to do at that point is start trying them. So let's try the very first one. Let's try 1. Okay, 1. Write our coefficients: 2, 3, -6, -8. Bring the 2 down. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. 1 times 5 is 5. -1, -1, -9. So this did not work. So +1 did not work. And so then you'd move to the next one and you'd try, you try that one. And then you could try -1 or try 1/2 and then try -1/2. And you keep trying them until you get till you find one that works. It turns out if you keep trying them, you'll find that -2 will work. So let's show you that one real quick. 2, 3, -6, -8. So keep trying and then bring down the 2, -4, -1, 2, -4, and then 8, and then there's a 0. So this one worked. And that means that we just found one of the zeros of it. So one of the zeros is -2. And then you could take this part, 2x squared minus x minus 4, set that equal to 0, and then factor that out, continue on ... factor that, and find the next 2 that would go right there and there. Okay? That is pretty much it for this section. There's another one, I think. Oh, no, there's not another one on here. I thought there was another one below it. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this section. That gets you started. Then you just kind of finish it the rest of the way once you find one of the factors. And that's kind of it from there. All right? So hopefully that made sense. If you had any trouble with any of it, rewind it, watch it again, pause it, think about it, and make sure that all this is making sense to you. Okay, that's it.